Good afternoon, everyone. Seeing that most CPAG members are now present, we'll have Sarah please call the roll so that we can establish a quorum.
Melanie Green.
Here.
Ed Montinsala.
Here.
Jorge Aguilar. Ron Anaya.
Here.
Bootsy Battle Holt.
Here.
Mia Cooper.
Here.
Diane Grotjohn.
Here.
Joanne Iskin.
Here.
Linda Kaminsky. Kimberly Kenny.
Here.
Tara Kinney. Nancy Lara. Nancy Lara. Jesse Levin.
Here.
Nancy Portillo. Tarina Small.
Here.
Janelle Woodward. Go ahead, Melanie.
Thank you, Sarah. I hereby call the June 2021 meeting of the California Practitioners Advisory Group to order at 1:03. And I'd like to commence by saluting the flag. Will a flag be up on the screen? Perfect. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. So like I said, I'm so excited to be here with all of you today. We're going to have a great meeting. I'm going to start with just a few logistics and reminders. Today, we will not be taking any formal breaks. So please step away from the meeting as needed. You don't need to ask for permission or anything like that. Just step away when you need to take any breaks throughout the day. A reminder about the chat function. We are not using the chat function. It should not be used by CPAG members unless you're in the need of technical assistance with Zoom. It's a violation of the Bagley-Keene to use the chat function to discuss the meeting. We will take up item 2 out of order to approve the meeting minutes from February 2021. And now I have the pleasure to invite board member Eileen Strauss to make any framing comments for us. So we're so happy to have you here, board member Strauss. Please take it away.
So hello, everybody. And let me just personally, on behalf of the state board, thank you for making time for this special meeting today. I know school is over, but you're thinking about reopening and people are exhausted trying to squeeze a little family vacation in. So honestly, it means a lot to us that we hear your voices. The practitioner voices are incredibly important on this item. And so let me just say the staff's worked hard. We've had a short timeline to prepare this item. And your voice and input into the issues that are going to be raised today will be taken forward. Our state board meeting is on July 14th, Wednesday, and we will be talking about this. As you know, it's a huge amount of money, and most of us remember painfully the budget cutting sessions that we've lived through in our careers. We want to be really smart about this money. We want to give people time to do it right and to make the right decisions. And we want it to be guided to make the best impact to help students that we can. So again, please be thoughtful, share your comments, give us ideas as we think about taking this forward. I know districts are busy thinking about this, and we really have an important process to hear your voice as well as other stakeholders before we discuss this at our meeting. So again, thank you so much. And I hope that after this, you guys actually get a little break for yourself and your family, which I know is so needed after the last 15 months. So thank you very much.
Thank you, board member Strauss. I echo appreciation for all the CPAG members on and the CDE and SBE staff for all the work that you've put in and the time that we'll put in today for this meeting. So thank you. A reminder about public input. Members of the public wishing to call in for public comment should view the live stream of the meeting to know what time public comment will occur for each item. Public comment can be provided during the meeting by dialing the phone number and access code listed on the screen. The operator will notify callers when it is their turn to provide public comment with an audio prompt. Public comment will be limited to 1 minute. We will ask all callers to please turn down the speaker volume of their computers if they're following the live webcast to avoid the echoing effect, like when you used to call into radio stations. One final reminder for CPAG members, please mute your microphones when not speaking and keep your cameras on to ensure that we maintain a quorum throughout today's virtual meeting. And as a reminder, you all are excellent as this, but please continue to use the raise hand feature using in the Zoom participant window if you would like to ask a question or make a comment. And we'll make sure we track everyone's raised hand and give everyone time to share their comment or question. So with that, we'll move into item 2 to approve the minutes from the February 2021 CPAG meeting. CPAG members, you were provided with the link to the draft minutes that are posted on the CPAG website. I'll give everyone about 2 minutes to review them. Okay, give you about I'll give you about 30 more seconds, and then we'll make sure that we have the phone line open for public comment. Members of the public wishing to provide comment on this item may do so by calling the number on the slide. So that will go up in just a minute, and you'll be notified when it's your time to speak. We encourage you to please state your name and affiliation for the record, and please remember to turn down the speaker volume of your computers if you're following the live feed. Speakers will be limited to 1 minute each.
Melanie, we are having a technical issue in the boardroom. We are working to get the public comment slide up. If you could hang tight for a few minutes.
No problem.
All right, Melanie, the public comment slide is now visible.
Awesome. So folks who are listening and would like to make public comment, you'll see the phone number on the screen with the passcode there. We'll give folks a second to call in if they'd like to make a public comment. We encourage you to state your name and affiliation for the record. Please remember to turn down the speaker volume of your computers if you're following the live feed. Any public comments, Sarah?
We do have one call on the line. I'm not sure that it is for item 2, but we will go ahead and check on in with him if that's okay.
Sounds great. Proceed.
Good morning, caller. Please state your name and affiliation for the record to provide public comment for item 2. This is for the meeting minute item. Your time starts now.
I am calling to comment on public item number 1, please.
Okay, thank you, caller. We will go ahead and leave you on the line then to provide public comment when we are taking public comment for item 1. We do not have any other public comment in the queue at this time.
Okay, thank you. CPAG members, is there any discussion on this item? Let me make sure I can see all your hands, your virtual hands. Okay, seeing no discussion, do we have a motion to approve the minutes? Thank you, Joanne. I see a motion, or Joanne, is that your hand for a question or a motion?
Move to approve the minutes.
Thank you, Joanne. Joanne moves to approve the minutes. Do we have a second? Bootsy, thank you so much. I have a second by Bootsy Battle Holt. We will now hold a roll call vote. Sarah, when you're ready, please call the vote.
Melanie Green,
Yes.
Ed Monazala,
Aye.
Jorge Aguilar, Ron Anaya,
Aye. Aye. Pardon me.
Bootsy Battle Holt,
Aye.
Mia Cooper,
Aye.
Diane Grotjohn,
Aye.
Joanne Iskin,
Aye.
Linda Kaminsky, Kimberly Kenny,
Aye.
Tara Kinney, Nancy Lara, Jesse Levin,
I abstain. I was absent for the last meeting.
thank you. Nancy Portillo,
I was also absent the last meeting. Abstain.
thank you. Tarina Small,
Aye.
and Janelle Woodward. All right, the motion carries.
Thank you so much, Sarah. We'll now move on to item 1. Item 1 is California State Plan for Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Funds as required under the American Rescue Plan Act. This item is presented by Ellie Garner, Director of the CDE Government Affairs Division, along with Heather Matson and Kelsey Carlson of WestEd. Ellie, when you're ready, please take it away.
We will be getting started in 1 minute. We are still addressing this presentation issue in the boardroom.
Go ahead. Well, people can take that minute to look over the item if you'd like. And as we're getting ready, I again just want to appreciate all the time folks have put into reading the item and putting the item together and being here today. So thank you. I think we can all see the PowerPoint now.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for your patience. It's red. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Ellie.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, Chair Green and Vice Chair Manansala. I'm Ellie Garner. I am the Division Director for the Government Affairs Division here at CDE. Today I have the honor of presenting the draft of the California State Plan for the for the elementary and secondary school emergency relief funds authorized under the American Rescue Plan Act, or what we'll be calling ARPA today. The U.S. Department of Education, or ED, has required that state education agencies complete a plan that addresses 7 critical areas. Over the course of the plan, we will address both what the state has done to address COVID-19, as well as what the state will do moving forward to help LEAs as they move to safely reopen schools in just a few short weeks. The plan must be completed in order to receive the final third of the funding that ED has withheld in the initial allocation from the initial disbursement of these ESSER funds. That third is worth approximately $5 billion. There is an incredibly tight timeline, as earlier mentioned, to complete this plan. ED's original due date was June the 7th, but we requested and received an extension from ED to incorporate outcomes from the state budget process, which impact the use of some of the funds described in this plan, and to seek approval from the State Board of Education and to conduct stakeholder engagement. That extension gives us until August the 2nd to finalize the plan and submit it to ED. As we move through this plan today, there are 2 things that you should know. The first is that in the state plan, when ED's prompts are shown, are in a slightly smaller font. We did that on purpose so that you can see our response in a different font so the reader can differentiate. The second is that the plan is currently in a draft form due to the ongoing state budget process. Many parts of the plan touch on topics that are linked to the ongoing budget process, such as how the state will use its share of federal funding and what is being done to support educators. Those uses of funds and levels of support are determined through the budget process, the committee hearings, and ultimately the negotiations between the governor and the legislature. Since we still do not have a complete signed budget and education trailer bills, some of those parts of the plan are currently incomplete. As soon as we have a final budget deal, we will update the draft, but unfortunately, today we are not there. I will be presenting a high-level overview of the content of the state plan. Periodically, we will stop for a discussion on strengths and gaps facilitated by Heather Matson of the Region 15 Comprehensive Center at WestEd. If you are ready, let's dive into the ARP ESSER 3 state plan. And I am not ready because I can't get my page to move. So first, let me cover a little bit of background. The ARP Act is the 3rd federal relief package that contains significant funding for education. The previous 2 federal relief packages were the CARES Act and the CARISA Act, and combined, they provided approximately $8.3 billion in relief funding specific to K-12 schools. However, the ARP Act is the first to require the state plan for these relief funds, which is why today is the first time I'm here to cover a state plan on federal funding. So the ARP Act was passed on March 11, 2021, and California was allocated over $15 billion in a 3rd round of the elementary and secondary school emergency relief funding. From here on out, I'm going to call it ESSER 3. Pursuant to the provisions of the ARP Act, over $13.5 billion of this allocation is subgranted to LEAs, and that's based on the LEA's share of funds received under Title I, Part A. A new requirement of the ARP Act and subsequent Department of Education guidance is a requirement for both LEAs and states to complete plans for ESSER 3 funding. One component of the ESSER state plan is that it requires stakeholder engagement and public comment. The CDE has conducted stakeholder engagement and gathered public comment through the California State Budget Development process, CDE's Tuesdays at 2 webinar, and is continuing to conduct stakeholder engagement and gather public comment through today's CPAG meeting and then at the State Board of Education meeting of July. Once the CDE receives stakeholder input and public comment at the State Board meeting, we will incorporate the feedback and submit the plan to the U.S. Department of Education on August the 2nd. So now we're diving in. There are 7 critical areas that were identified by ED. This came directly out of the state plan template, and you can see each of the 7 and what they need to address. And we will begin walking through those. Before we dive in each of those 7, As I shared earlier, our focus today is really to look forward. The template briefly asks for a description of the strategies we used from March 20 to the spring of 2021, but the emphasis from ED is really to look forward on what we plan to do to assist LEAs in fully reopening and how we plan to improve student outcomes. This plan represents a look forward and really paints a picture of what we are currently doing and what we plan to do. So the first area of critical need identified in the state template is describing the state's current status and needs. Section A asks us to describe the progress that we have made to support students' needs, the priorities guiding ESSER 3 funding decisions, and current and projected operating status of schools. So, the state plan must include a description of the most impactful practices for supporting student needs during COVID-19. The CDE and the SBE worked closely with the Governor's Office and the California Department of Public Health through the Safe Schools for All team, along with input from stakeholders to identify the most impactful practices. And those three were identified as first, distance learning guidance, second, expanded access to devices, broadband, and connectivity, and finally, guidance to LEAs to support the safe return to in-person learning. Then the state plan requires the SEA to identify the overall priorities for the state. These are the top 3 issues currently facing schools and students across California as a result of COVID-19. First, mental health and trauma needs of students, families, and staff. Second, accelerated learning needs. And finally, safe return to full-time in-person instruction. So then we move to identifying the needs of underserved students. The state is required to describe the needs of underserved students. Underserved students are identified by ED as students from low-income families, students of color, English learners, children with disabilities, students experiencing homelessness, children and youth in foster care, migratory students, youth involved in the criminal justice system, and LGBTQIA students. The plan includes details about the needs for each of those groups, and the slide above really just highlights some of those. Another prompt from ED asks the state to describe how it will support LEAs in identifying the extent of the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on student learning and student well-being. The state plan describes how stakeholder engagement is foundational to how California understands the impacts of changes such as the pandemic. The plan then covers the local control accountability plan as a critical data collection tool as school districts engage their communities to assess student needs, opportunity gaps, and areas for improvement. It also notes that the CDE has continued to use the California School Dashboard to understand the needs of districts, schools, and student groups. Additionally, CDE produced the resource Guidance on Diagnostic and Formative Assessments in August 2020 to guide districts on collecting data on student needs and assets. Then ED asked us to look at school operating status. This prompt required CDE to describe schools' operational status and their mode of instruction. This data collection included whether schools were open for in-person, hybrid, or distance learning only every second and fourth Monday of each month. And then we moved to summer learning. This prompt required a description of the planned operational status and mode of instruction for the state and its LEAs for summer 2021 and for the upcoming school year of 21-22. And I'm going to hand it now to Heather Matson for a group discussion.
Thanks, Ellie. Hi, everyone. My name is Heather Matson. I'm the Deputy Director of the Region 15 Comprehensive Center at WestEd, and we are a federally funded center that provides technical assistance to the state departments of California, Arizona, Nevada, and Utah. And we've been working with CDE and SBE staff on the ARP plan. So, and I spoke with Chair Green yesterday, and we decided that I would call on folks as you raise your hands during this group discussion time so she can participate. And just want to hear from you all. I know you just heard a lot of information from Ellie and had a little bit of time to look at the plan. What is striking you as strengths of what the information that's presented? Are you seeing any gaps in what's presented so far? And we're just looking at section A. We'll have 3 more discussion breaks as Ellie presents more information. But on the slides that Ellie just presented, please raise your hands and I can call on you. So far, I just see Kimberly Kenny's hand raised. Kimberly.
Sorry to be a pain, but is the PowerPoint, can it be sent to us if it's not already posted? It's sometimes hard, like there was that list of 7 things and then it went away before I actually had time to really digest them, and it's nice to have that to refer to. So is it possible to email it to us right now so that we can follow along, but also go back to in other words, well, anyway, so I did read the plan, but I think you just want us to talk about what has been presented so far.
Yes, please. I'll defer to CDE or SBE staff on that question.
We'd be happy to pull up the slide as needed for the conversation. We don't have a form that we can send via email right now. So if we need to move to the 7 critical areas, we can certainly pull that slide right up.
Hang on 1 second, I will take a photo of it. So the question that you're asking us, we've gone over just A and B, is that true?
We have gone over, yes, A and B so far.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Eileen Strauss, I see that your hand is raised.
Just to follow up on what Kimberly asked for, I asked for the slide deck as well, Kimberly, and I think we may be able to get it by tomorrow. So we will get it. I think they're trying to format it correctly to be able to post it and share.
Thank you. And if there was one slide that people wanted CDE to turn to that we've just seen, feel free to ask that. I see Bootsy Battleholt's hand raised.
Yeah, I was just going to sort of ask the same question. If you could flip through, just sort of go back to that 7 and then go maybe stay about 10 seconds on each slide so we can kind of review what we just saw. That'd be great. Thank you.
So whoever's driving the slides, if you could just please kind of slowly scroll through what Ellie just presented. Here comes section A.
There may be a pause here. Yeah, perfect.
Yeah. And I saw Melanie's hand raised first, then Kimberly, and then Bootsy. Melanie.
I just wanted to pull out one of the strengths when I was reading through the highest priority needs by student group was just the focus on things that are affecting our students and families that aren't in the direct control of schools. I feel like oftentimes we put the focus so intensely on the teacher and the student, and there's so many other causes and factors that are important to our students and families' lives. So just specifically appreciated the call out of cost-effective childcare for low-income families. And I also appreciate all the work that LEAs and schools have done over the last year and a half to think differently about childcare and think differently about how they can use their funds to support, all aspects of the day, especially for our families that have all parents and folks working. So I just wanted to say that I thought that was a strength, really seeing some needs that don't necessarily normally come up in conversation and pulling those out and encouraging LEAs and schools to think differently about how they're supporting our students and families. So that was a strength I saw.
Thanks, Melanie. Kimberly.
Is this the section where we would talk about outreach consultation?
We will be talking in a little more detail about that coming up, correct, Ellie?
That's correct. Engagement and consultation is a little bit further down the road.
All right. Well, I will mention, because I think one of the things that was highlighted in the plan as a positive was a lot of the flexibility that districts were given by the state. And I just wanted to say that I think it was unfortunate for our ELs last fall, so not the LPAC that's being given now this spring, but last fall, there were extensions, and then the guidance from the CDE, I would say, said, do the best you can with testing for your English learners. And there was a significant, window given also for initially identifying students, who are new to your system as ELs. And so what I found in our district is that we didn't test a high percentage. I think it was a very low percentage of students who had already been English learners in our system. So I just feel, especially for students who potentially would have transitioned out and been reclassified as English proficient, especially our secondary students, they had to take ELD classes for an entire, or, get that kind of support for another year because they didn't have the opportunity to do the test. And so again, I appreciate that there was flexibility given to districts. I think just in that case, the students might have suffered a little bit. And I'm not sure if this is this is more, I was going through the document. There was some talk about how the state is giving significant sums of money to the districts. And there is going to be money coming to us as the budget is finalized, but the districts haven't been able to talk to our stakeholders about that or incorporate it into our LCAPs or our budget planning because it wasn't real yet. That will happen later. So just want to reflect on, there's some timing issues in terms of, that support from the state is coming. It's just not coming necessarily in a time where we would have already done the planning for it. And then I don't know exactly where the data stuff is, but I did want to say that if the spring assessments that our districts took, if they went with an internal versus the SBAC, I wasn't clear if the first time the public and many stakeholders will be able to see that is in December, which would mean that it wouldn't be available as we're doing consultations and outreach to make this plan for the spending of the ESSER 3 funds. So I wanted to clarify if there would be some presentation of that. Maybe the expectation is that districts would present it themselves to their stakeholders and that it wouldn't be available on a statewide basis until December.
Thank you, Kimberly. And I should have said at the outset that CD and SBE staff are taking copious notes on everything that you're saying to make sure that it's getting into our thinking for the next version of this plan. And And yes, I think a couple of the points you raised will come into play a little further on too. So we'll make sure to circle back to that. And I also realized that I misspoke earlier. We're just looking at section A so far. That's all that Ellie's spoken to. Bootsy.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for kicking us off with this. I'm curious if there is anything in the plan around data collection or evaluation of best practices, places where there were gains and positive impacts at all. We know that there are things like, increased access to technology, some things around hybrid scheduling that may have been positive impacts. It looks so far as if the plan is really going to be focused on sort of helping out where there are deficits. And I'm wondering if there's any part of the plan that has to do with uplifting best practices or gains.
Thank you. Yeah, it might be helpful to go back to the promising practices slide number 3. There is a high level look at promising practices in the plan, but again, a high level look.
Yeah, thank you for going back to this slide. I sort of forgot that I wanted to say something about this slide as well, which was that the support for the safe return looks very much focused on logistics to me. And so I'm looking for a little bit more of some of maybe those soft measures somehow of maybe social emotional learning, as I said, like tech skills, some other sorts of things that that help students safely return.
Noted. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Just checking to see if there are any other hands raised, and I don't see any. Oh, wait a second. I didn't notice who was first, so I'll just go in the order that I see them on my screen. I see Tarina Small and then Diane Grotjohn.
Hi, I would like to thank you guys for all of this. Can we go back to that slide again? And I totally agree with Bootsy when she talks about the social emotional health, that we need to address those things. I don't see where that is. Like, I don't see the connection. And then with the distance learning guidelines, does that mean, and yes, the mental health, but is that what that goes under, that section? And then how they're going to be able to do that? And then does it matter if they are going to be like the distance learning guidelines? I couldn't find anything on that. So do you have to choose in person, or do you have to choose, you can choose whatever, like hybrid? Like schools will be able to choose or modify when they want to, or does it? Yeah, I don't know. But yeah. To make it more interconnected and how we're going to be able to serve those students and how long we're going to be able to provide those services for them, I think is really important.
Thank you. So another note for social emotional learning, and then some clarity on requirements for in-person. I appreciate that. Diane, and then Nancy Lara.
Yeah, I know the state and federal both were really pushing for this return to an in-classroom environment. But one of the things I'm seeing is this whole COVID thing has so disrupted education and disrupted the system that new systems have been put in place that they're likely to hang on. And so I kind of had this overriding concern just in general that we're pushing to go back to the way it was before COVID, and I don't think that's true. I don't think that's ever going to be true. I think that's something that is long gone. And so while I understand what we're saying about wanting to help things get back to an in-person on-site school program, I really would like to hear a little more along the lines of, and we recognize that's not true totally, and I think we're touching on it a little bit in this plan, just a tip, when they start talking about hybrid and remaining in the online or offsite programs, but we're still treating it as if this is kind of an anomaly that's eventually going to go away and we're all going to be back in the classroom. And I just think that's a foolish way to look at it. I think that's true.
Heather, may I jump in?
Yes, please.
We absolutely agree with you that the modes of education are certainly going to change. We are responding here only really to a prompt that ED has provided us because the money is explicitly within the federal guidelines of how we will be supporting LEAs to provide a safe return to full-time in-person instruction. We're only responding to that. The question of LEAs providing hybrid or distance learning, those are really outside of this plan. This is our response to what the federal government is specifically asking us to do of what we're doing to support full-time in-person instruction in the fall.
Yeah, and I understood that, and I realize that's where we're going. I just wanted it out there. Sorry.
Thanks, Diane. Nancy, Lara.
Hi, everyone. Diane, I just want to echo what you're saying. I think that what we've learned this last year and a half is that what we were doing wasn't always working. So I'm really excited about the changes that are coming forth. So I'm going to echo what you said in that area. And as far as strengths in this first section is, I definitely find that the mental health and trauma needs of students is a huge strength. Kids are not going to be able to learn until they're ready to learn. They've been experiencing so much for the last year and a half that we cannot teach until they are ready to learn. So all of this work with, and I think there was some information there on working with not just mental health, but developing programs that are going to support the mental health issues that they're all going to be coming back to us with is going to be very important. And another strength is really focusing on the needs of our underserved students. This whole year and a half has really, again, focused on what our kids are missing, our underserved students are missing. So I'm really looking forward to having a lot more work done around that area so that we can move forward. And again, connecting to what Diane was saying, we can't do our work the way we've been doing it because now we know where our needs are. This has really pointed out what our kids need and what we need as educators to move forward.
Thank you, Nancy. I see 3 more hands raised, so we'll go with Linda Kaminsky first, then Joanne Iskin, and then Ron and Naya, please.
Thank you very much. I wanted to compliment the use of the term accelerated learning. I think in developing this plan, the idea that we're not going to go back to the traditional ways of working with students who may not be performing at the level that we would like them to be has been a remedial approach. And so I appreciate that in this document there is the term accelerated learning used a number of times. The question that I have, though, is that's a huge shift in instructional practice for many, many folks, and even for the materials that are available for people to work with, which have tended to be remedial type materials to use with students. And I can easily imagine that this will take a considerable amount of effort for people to understand how to do it, and I appreciate the references that are in the plan as guidelines. But I really would like the state to think about how could it help support people knowing and being able to implement an accelerated approach. That might be professional development, it might be some models that are out there that are really fleshed out. And just as the state has put on webinars, for example, on how to reopen classrooms or schools, should the state also be thinking about really taking the lead and helping people understand what accelerated learning means in practice, and exemplars of how to do that. Otherwise, I think we run the risk of it being lovely language, but very difficult to implement. Thank you.
Thank you. Joanne Iskin.
Not even sure how to ask the question, so I'll do the best I can. But as I'm looking at the groups of needs of underserved students, there's a population that I think is invisible, and I don't know how they can be made visible. But I know enrollments dropped drastically in many places, and students were lost in the system. And I don't know if there can be some attention paid to how to bring those students back, how to make sure we find them, how to be sure that they become re-engaged in the system. I wouldn't want that group to be lost.
Thanks, Joanne. Ron and Naya.
Thank you. And I'm sorry if I misheard this, but I think that it was said that the money will be distributed proportionally with the distribution of Title I funds or somewhere along those lines. Is that correct?
Ellie, can you confirm that?
Certainly can. The federal, the regulations as outlined in the way the bill was written on the federal level is that funds go out via Title I-A. Yes.
Okay. And so I'm imagining there's not a lot of wiggle room there if that's the way that it's written into the law itself. Going back to the presentation, I would like to acknowledge there was a strength there of addressing our marginalized groups, including our students experiencing homelessness, foster youth, English language learners, and I think that is powerful that they're being addressed specifically there. And I know that most LEAs are doing acting in good faith for those groups as well. But we're talking about if the money's going out the same way that Title I is. I think that is a strength in that it's going to go to those communities that have higher proportions of these students than others that receive fewer Title I dollars. But it feels like we're doing a proportional response to a disproportionate impact to a number of these districts, and not having that data yet to know exactly how powerful that impact was puts us at a bit of a disadvantage. And I understand that's part of the vagueness in that part of it. And I know that we're trying to look forward, not back, but we're kind of looking forward with backwards looking lenses and trying to address the same things with the same solutions with no requirements as to how the dollars are being spent. And I'm a big proponent of local control, but I'm just wondering about the accountability piece and how we're going to check back on this and see what the impact was that the LEAs are having with the monies that they're being given. And I think there is a huge opportunity here to truly look forward and to make some strong changes in the way that we're going to do things post-COVID, because there's no guarantee that this isn't coming back or some sort of variant isn't coming back, and we might find ourselves in the same seat with the same problems again, and then reacting once again instead of being proactive. With issues such as technology access, interventions, attendance for students, family engagement. I think we need to definitely put some spotlights on those types of issues that address our marginalized students going forward and try to strengthen that while we have an opportunity.
Thanks, Ron. And Ellie will go into more detail. The final section is on monitoring, section G, so we'll be coming back around. I'm not seeing any other hands raised. I'll just give a short amount of wait time. Okay, I'll turn it back over to Ellie for section B.
Thank you, Heather. So now we're going to move to the safely reopening schools and sustaining their safe operations. As just a quick regroup, I want to identify that these sections were all identified in the template by ED, and so we're really responding to prompts of what they're asking us to do. So in this section, the template asks that the state education agency describe how LEAs will be supported in safely returning to in-person instruction and how those LEAs will sustain the safe operation of schools. So looking to support for LEAs. This slide describes the many ways that the CDE supported LEA's safe return to in-person instruction and their ability to sustain the safe operation in schools. As part of this section, the state is required to describe how it will support LEAs in implementing the most current guidance from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. California has been very forward-thinking in its response to the pandemic, and as such, the state has already taken a number of actions to address the CDC guidance. A few notable highlights here are that the CDE, SBE, and various state partners have worked together to allocate and coordinate the distribution of PPE, hand sanitizer, and touchless thermometers to all California schools, including private schools. They've also provided support for LEAs through technical assistance, guidance, testing, and resources. And Governor Newsom and the California legislature provided $6.6 billion in the state budget, including $2 billion for in-person instruction, or what we call IPI grants, on March 5th, 2021, before ARP was signed into law. As a condition of the IPI grants, LEAs were required to offer in-person instruction as defined by Assembly Bill 86, and funding can be used for things like COVID-19 testing, cleaning and disinfection, PPE, and others. The template includes a required field for LEAs to describe how they will ensure continuity of services, including but not limited to services to address students' academic needs and students' and staff's social, emotional, mental health, and other needs. This may include student health and food services. This is one of 2 plans LEAs are required to complete. The CDE has created a template that LEAs can complete to ensure that they are in compliance with the ARP Act. This includes public comment and stakeholder feedback on the plan as well. This template also satisfies the requirement found in the U.S. Department of Education guidance that LEAs adopt policies to address CDC guidance for schools. I would just note that the ARP Act allows for an LEA who had a plan in place as of March 11th that is compliant with ARP statute to be grandfathered in for a period of up to 6 months. As such, the state allows those LEAs to use the abbreviated template to verify that they're currently in compliance. LEAs are required to review and, if appropriate, revise their plans at least every 6 months. The CDE will track the required revisions through LEA quarterly and annual reporting of their funds. While I recognize that I just completed all of the Section B, there are 2 sections that are very, very brief, so I will cover those and then we will pause for discussion to discuss all that's been covered to this point. The next section of plan requires that the state describe how it will use and coordinate its ESSER 3 funds. The first prompt in this section addresses how the state has engaged in meaningful consultation with stakeholders and incorporated input into the plan. The first webinar solicited input from LEAs and the public at large and had 572 attendees, while the second webinar solicited input from advocates representing the interests of students who are English learners and their families, homeless students, foster youth, migratory students, children who are incarcerated, and other underserved students, and that webinar had 15 attendees. Again, I would note that this is an ongoing process since we are gathering feedback at this very meeting, as well as at the State Board of Education meeting next month. This part of the draft will be more fleshed out following the conclusion of these 2 meetings. The remainder of this section focuses on how the state has coordinated or will coordinate the use of other federal funding. The CDE has awarded all of ESSER 1 funding that must flow directly to LEAs. The CDE has also allocated in its entirety $167 million of ESSER 1, $355 million of the Governor's Education Relief, or GEAR 1 funding, and $4.4 billion in coronavirus relief funding, or CRF, that was dedicated to education. All of these funds were made available in the CARES Act, and the uses were determined as part of last year's budget process. Then from the CARISA Act, which happened last winter, the first apportionment of ESSER 2 has been sent to LEAs, while the state shares of ESSER 2 and GEAR 2 funds will be dispersed once the uses are determined and the budget is finalized. And then finally, we're going to jump to maximizing state-level funds to support students before we have our break for discussion. So now we're looking at evidence-based interventions and evaluations. The SEA reserve for ESSER 3 is approximately $1.5 billion. The ARP Act requires half of this to go directly to address learning loss, 10% for summer learning and enrichment programs, and another 10% for comprehensive after-school programs. Up to 5% can be used for administration, while the remaining 25% is flexible. For this funding, the uses are being determined as part of the negotiations between the governor and the legislature. The final budget approval is still pending, and as such, this is another section that will need to be finalized and fleshed out once the budget is final and signed into law. And this is the moment that I hand it back over to Heather for conversation.
Great, thanks, Ellie. So yes, that was 3 sections. As you all know from looking at the plan, this is a lot of information for staff to try and condense for you into this slide deck. But that was section B, safely reopening schools and sustaining their safe operations. C, planning for the use and coordination of ARP ESSER funds. And D, maximizing state level funds to support students. I'll be looking for raised hands and let us know if there's a particular slide you want us to go back to. So I saw Kimberly Kenny, Jessie Levin, Joanne Iskin are the first 3 I see. Kimberly.
So is this the place to discuss the templates for school districts?
So this conversation is really not going to be about the template itself. This conversation is about the state level plan. We're certainly open to taking feedback and bringing it back to program staff to take notes, but we're really looking forward to the conversation about the state level plans rather than the local education agency plans.
Okay, but you know what? I'm sorry, I'm getting hung up on when to say what. So I'll say this about the plan, and because I think it also is here in the state plan as well. When it's talking about stakeholder consultation, what it asks districts to fill out is things like, tell us about the efforts you made, tell us about the opportunities you provided for stakeholder engagement. And I'm just reflecting that if it doesn't say how many people did you actually interact with or were you successful. And sometimes this becomes very checklisty. And, we don't say, well, did we provide opportunities for students to learn? We actually want to see that they learned. And so, again, I'm just reflecting that sometimes when we consistently use that kind of language, it really gives people an out as long as they made an effort. There wasn't actually any, meaningful consultation, I think is the phrase that's mentioned in this document. So I want to reflect on that. And then a very specific question. The template said how much of your money is not in this plan. And I just wanted to understand better, are we asking districts to show all of the money that they're getting, that they have a plan for it, or can they do a partial, similar to how we do with LCAPs? So maybe no one has that answer today, but I did want to ask those 2 things.
Thanks, Kimberly. And I should say we do have CDE content staff here also. They're taking notes on questions and can follow up. Yeah.
There's also the opportunity to move into the next one. The expenditure plan is part of section E.
Great, thanks. And then I think we also did talk about monitoring too, and I think that was part of Kimberly's question. That'll be in the last section. Jessie Levin.
Hi, thanks so much for putting this all together. I have a couple of things that float around section C and D that I guess I would like to see. One is in the planning and coordination of the ESSER funds, and I don't know if I just missed it, but it really seemed to be a gap, between how the plan addresses coordinating the ESSER dollars with IDEA dollars. And IDEA is a really, really, really important federal funding source. So I guess I'd like to see something in there, and it just seemed a little light there. And I realized that the plan is by no means finished. There are almost placeholders in places, right? So I think there's going to be more work there. I guess I would like to also see something in there that talks about how the state will develop capacity or work with LEAs to improve the coordination of different federal streams of revenues, but also coordinating federal streams of revenues with state revenues. And I think that's really, really important. And I didn't really get that there. The other thing that I wanted to talk about, which is, I guess, more relevant to maximizing the state funds, but it could be relevant to coordination as well, is the plan talks a lot about identifying, impactful those populations that have been most impacted, and then choosing effective evidence-based practices. And I think that that's very important, but almost nowhere does it say anything about cost-effective practices. That is taking it forward one step. So it's not just looking at sort of the most impactful practices, but also those that are most cost-effective. And I think it almost deserves mention so that the state and LEAs are thinking about that. And then the last point that I wanted to make that I would really like to see is I'm really worried about districts making choices that set them up for fiscal cliffs. And I really didn't see too much in there that talked about contemplation of sustainable practices and how districts might sustain how they spend the money. And so either you set up these one-time investments, or you set up investments that are going to go over the longer term, and you have some sort of plan how to sustain those investments once the ESSER dollars go away. So those are the points that I wanted to make. And thanks again for putting this together. I know it's a pretty monumental effort.
Thanks, Jesse. Thanks for those notes on funding. So I'm going to go to Joanne Iskin next, and then I see Ed, Linda, and Ron in that order. So Joanne, please.
So tell me if this isn't the time to ask, but I know Kimberly raised the question earlier about stakeholder input. Is this the time and section to ask that question?
Yes, Ellie did talk about stakeholder input here.
Okay, I'm just curious because I understand the timelines are short, and you're trying to move this through very rapidly with the intention of really receiving the money and getting it out to LEAs. And so I can appreciate that, and I'm sure LEAs appreciate that as well. I'm just wondering, in terms of stakeholder input, I heard you say this is coming to us now, CPAG, and then to the state board. But I see, as you've said, much of the plan is still incomplete for a lot of reasons that are out of your control, other timelines. So at any point, will a complete plan before it goes to the state board be available for stakeholder input beyond that board meeting? Or will that be the time that the public sees for the first time the complete plan?
So we are unfortunately under the timeline of the USED, and these funds were, their express goal was to get the dollars out as quickly as possible to LEAs once we completed our state plan. And again, bear in mind that the states wanted, or that USED wanted us to actually turn this in by June 7th. Imagine what kind of comment and timeline we'd have there. So really, we're holding back a final draft, and we're not holding it back. The draft that you received is our most up-to-date draft. But many of the decisions about expenditures and how funds can be used is something that's really decided through our budget process, right? Through our governor and the legislature. And ultimately, those decisions are what we're waiting on. So we will post a final version of the plan as soon as that process is completed, across the park from us. And at that point in time, we will certainly post it. And the opportunity to engage on that final plan will be through the State Board of Education meeting in July.
Thanks, Ellie. Ed Manansala.
So thank you again in just this entire comprehensive document and planning. I just want to speak specifically to the area of safely reopening schools and sustaining their safe operations. I think looking back since March 2020 to where we are now and moving forward, I believe CDE, and of course I'm looking through the lens as a county superintendent, worked well and close with county offices in addressing reopening plans. So when I'm thinking of the mitigation efforts, the surveillance testing, the distribution of PPE. And so I just want to be able to acknowledge that, because in the plan itself, I think there's room to be able to highlight the work that has been taking place and will continue in the partnership with CDE, CDPH, and the county offices.
Great, thank you. Linda Kaminsky. Linda, if you're speaking, you might be muted. I don't have you in my view right now, but we're not hearing you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I apologize. I just had two comments. One is a question really about a topic that was brought up by another speaker in terms of consultation and input perspectives. I'm wondering, is there a repository of these comments with a response from the state that, say, the public could look at?
Right now, the input from the stakeholders is woven throughout the plan. Am I correct in that, Ellie?
You are correct. We do not have a repository. We have gathered letters that have been sent to the State Board of Education, to the California Department of Education, the Department of Finance, and others in regards to this, and of course to the state budget, acknowledging all of those dollars. And so we utilized all of those comments throughout the plan.
Well, thank you for clarifying that. One thing that could be helpful as we move forward, and particularly as we get closer to finalizing it, is maybe on one of the slides highlight some examples of where there were discussions or comments made and how they were addressed as a way for transparency and for reassurance, to help people recognize if their comments were heard and acted on. And I understand that some are going to be comments that the state may say yes, they need to act on, and some may say no. But it's very reassuring to the public to know what's happening with their comments. The other question I had, and this harkens back to my days managing federal funds in a school district and under the mantra of supplement versus supplant. And my question here is, somebody else mentioned the issue of state money versus these federal funds. Is the use of these federal funds under kind of the same guidance that it should be used for supplementing rather than supplanting state funds?
That's a great question. So the question about supplanting versus supplementing, this is a supplement. It does not supplant state dollars.
Okay. And what are the mechanisms for which a district would monitor that or the state would monitor that to make sure it's happening correctly?
So we have a monitoring section that we will get to here shortly.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Linda, and thanks, Ellie. Ron, I had you in my notes, but I don't see your hand raised. Did you want to make a comment here?
I'm not sure this is the right time for it's more of just a wondering. There was a section that mentioned after-school programs as one of the areas for addressing intervention and learning loss. And I was just curious if that was after school means on site necessarily, or is that open to things like contracted tutoring or even district personnel tutoring, either at home or, again, it's just more of an equity issue, meeting students where they are versus where you are. So I'm not sure if this is the right time to ask that question. It was more of just a curiosity anyway.
Great. Well, we'll make note of it. Thank you. And then I see Kimberly Kenny and Tarina Small's hands raised. Kimberly?
Sorry, this has to do, I think you mentioned that districts need to submit or have an opening plan or a safe, I can't remember the exact phrase, a plan. And it sounded like there was an opportunity to use the existing plans that perhaps the schools wrote back in January or February when we were contemplating reopening in the one that was, I think, required for the IPI grant. And so I wanted to make sure, I think when I was reading this, it sounds like they can reuse a plan there as long as it meets all the requirements, but that it has to be, I can't remember if it was said resubmitted after 6 months. And then it also has to be in the new format. So whatever format our plans were as districts in the, back in the early spring, we would have to do a different format in December. Is that true? Is that what I'm understanding from what I was reading?
Yes, I believe so. And so can we go back to the safe return to in-person instruction and continuity of services plan? I believe it's number 17. So the federal requirements have two LEA plans required. One is the Safe Return to In-Person Instruction plans. And unfortunately, this was just a timing issue. So California passed AB 86 on March the 5th. And then on March 11th, we had the ARP Act passed. And so schools that had passed by March 11th, their plan already for safe reopening, that works for this time around. But in their update in the next 6 months, they will have to utilize the template that is approved by the feds. The regulations from the federal government required us to provide a template, and the LEAs use that within 6 months. And so those LEAs that had already adopted are good to go, and then when they refresh in 6 months, we'll have to utilize the template that we have posted. But those that didn't have one prior to March 11th and that did not utilize public comment and stakeholder engagement do have to do a new plan at this point in time.
Thanks for that.
Great, thank you.
Ellie. Tarina.
Once again, I just love all of these things that they're addressing on here. And I would like to just reiterate about sustaining, I think, in this whole thing. But I had a question. I know I was looking and it says all schools, all charter schools, and then you guys said something about Title I, but does that include DAS schools too? Or is that not an issue? Or is it, I think all schools are going to need these funds. It shouldn't be just for one types of school or, just Title I-A.
So all schools that receive any ESSER dollars are required to do these plans. So if you receive these dollars and you fill out the assurances and you are eligible for these dollars, you do have to do those plans. Does that help? And yes, DAS schools are eligible for, should be eligible for Title I.
Thanks, Ellie. Nancy Portillo, I see your hand raised.
Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for all of your work on this. I have this, in my role and what I do for private schools, I have this really unique opportunity where I engage in timely and meaningful consultation with over 70 LEAs and several county offices. And I think about this term called, consultation, meaningful consultation. I'm wondering, as we serve our students in this state with meaningful consultation, in the application, as consultation is continuous. So wherever and whenever this is submitted, it's a continuous consultation point. Is there language being provided in the application where stakeholders will be provided an opportunity to provide continued consultation throughout this process?
So I'm going to ask you a question back. Are you asking about state level consultation or LEA level consultation?
State level. I feel like when this initially launched, I think the state can include plans to continue consultation after its initial submission of application, if I'm correct or incorrect. And I wonder if there is going to be language in the submission saying we're going to continue consultation with various stakeholder groups, to monitor or some sort of language like that.
This is definitely something for us to take and consider and clarify for the next round coming to the state board. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy and Ellie. Any final comments on these 3 sections before we move on? Linda Kaminsky, I see your hand raised.
That pesky unmute button. Thank you. And like many others, I'm not sure if this is applicable to this section, but it was something that was mentioned earlier. One of the strengths, I think, of this program is it recognizes social emotional needs of our students, and it also recognizes academic needs. One of the fears that I have is that people will determine that those are sequential needs, that they need to be addressed in first start with the social emotional, and when that's fixed, then move to the academic. And is there anything in this plan that helps people see that these need to be intertwined? They need to be ongoing together, that you don't do one without the other, and you don't wait to start one when you think a child is fixed one way or the other, academically or in terms of emotional status, but that these are ongoing and they're interwoven and they help each other. Is there any language around that for guidance for our districts and schools?
I don't believe we have any language to that effect, but it's certainly something for us to take into consideration. Thank you so much.
Okay, you're welcome.
Any other final comments on these sections? I'm going to turn it back over to Ellie, who's going to take us through 2 more sections, and we'll have another conversation break after that.
So now we're moving into section E, which I believe is really one of the most important opportunities for us to take a look at how the state template asks SEAs to describe how it will support LEAs in planning for and meeting students' academic, social, emotional, and mental health needs, and by addressing the opportunity gaps that existed before and were exacerbated by the pandemic. So I will note that that last comment, I think, was a fantastic transition to where we're headed next. So I know I have another text-heavy slide here. So LEA plans for the use of ARP and ESSER 3 funds. Each LEA that receives ESSER 3 funds will have to complete an ESSER 3 expenditure plan in accordance with ED guidance. The CDE has created a template to support LEAs in meeting the requirements that is close to being finalized. The CDE presented this template for stakeholder feedback at one of the Tuesdays at 2 webinars. Stakeholder engagement is foundational for ESSER 3 expenditure plans. For these plans, LEAs will have to describe how they met stakeholder feedback and how public comment was incorporated into these plans. CDE will provide training and guidance throughout this process related to the requirement to engage meaningful consultation with stakeholders. So then stakeholder engagement in LEA ESSER 3 plans. LEAs are required to consult with stakeholders for their plans. Community members should include students, families, school and district administrators, including special education administrators, teachers, principals, school leaders, other educators, school staff, and local bargaining units as applicable, tribes, civil rights organizations, including disability rights organizations, and individuals or advocates representing the interests of children with disabilities, English learners, homeless students, foster youth, migratory students, children who are incarcerated, and other underserved students as applicable. LEAs must describe how interventions respond to the academic, social, emotional, and mental health needs of students, particularly those students most impacted by the 2019 pandemic. To reduce the duplication of effort and promote coherent planning, LEAs will be provided with the flexibility to reference or include actions described in existing plans to the extent that those actions address the requirements by ED. LEA plans will be due September 30th, 2021, following the adoption by the local governing board or body at a public meeting. We're going to move to section F, which is supporting the educator workforce. The second to last section requires that the state to describe how the educator workforce will be supported. We recognize that this is an incredibly important part of the plan. The first portion of this section is focused on the extent to which there is an educator shortage, how the state will assist LEAs in identifying the most urgent areas for shortages or potential shortages, and steps to fill or anticipate gaps in certified teachers. The draft plan clearly lays out that California has shortages in a wide range of teaching and support staff positions. In recognition of that shortage, California has used both state and federal funding to retain teachers. So looking at state investments in staff. There are, in addition to federal dollars, there are significant investments planned for teacher recruitment in our state. The final investments will be detailed at the conclusion of the budget process. As we've discussed earlier, these are still in process and in negotiation, so we don't have all of these details at this point in time. Heather, it's back to you.
Thanks, Ellie. So yet two key sections, supporting LEAs and planning for and meeting students' needs. Section E and Section F, supporting the educator workforce. Again, we'll ask for strengths and gaps. And just to help you plan. The next and final section coming up is monitoring. Linda Kaminsky, I see your hand raised.
Thank you. Would you mind going back one slide, please?
Yes.
The staff, the state investments for the staff. I'm actually very pleased to see this kind of support because we have to deal with the shortage, but we also need to recognize and support our current staff too. And so I have a couple of questions. One is, are these the only programs that, or are there other supports?
Your audio got a little bit choppy there, Linda, but I think I heard you say, are these the only ones?
Or are there other opportunities that districts could avail themselves or teachers could avail themselves of?
So this is where we have to go back to our reliance upon the state budget between the governor and the legislature and where those dollars are going. And so we have to avail ourselves to the list of programs and expansion opportunities that are defined in the budget process. So these are some of the programs that have been listed in negotiations that are continuing today. And so these are the ones that we can reference at this point in time.
All right, thank you very much.
Thanks, Ellie. Other comments on these last two sections, or these two sections that Ellie just went over? Kimberly Kenny.
So on page 43 of the plan, there were a number of, I think, questions that said, how is the state supporting and monitoring? And it said pending, the understanding of the budget, the finalization of the budget. And I guess I just was reflecting that I wasn't clear then how the monitoring would work. And I'm assuming the monitoring would happen kind of whether there's a little money, a lot of money, the specifics of the money. And so again, I guess I'm just kind of reacting to some of these parts. I guess we won't see until the final version is going to the state board. One of the correspondence that we got talked about consultation and again, more at the district level, and reflected that we really still are on a learning curve in terms of having what I would call, effective, at least in my district, maybe other districts are farther along than we are, but I don't find that we share a lot of data or needs assessments with the public. So we ask for their consultation on how to spend money, but we don't always give them that context and understanding. So they may, as a parent or as a community member, see a very, very small, narrow part of our district and not really have enough context to give meaningful consultation, which I think is one of the reasons it's frustrating for both sides. It's frustrating for our district staff because often they get wish lists that may not be practical, may not be what's best for kids, may not be an effective use of money. But again, that process. And so, again, this is a very large amount of money for many districts. And I hope that when we're giving them that guidance on how to do consultation, that we really impress that if you don't give the people you're consulting with, a good handle on the context and where you are, it's very, very difficult to get concrete, usable solutions for how to spend money and what kind of actions to implement.
Thanks, Kimberly. Noted. Joanne Iskin and then Linda Kaminsky.
I apologize, I'm not as familiar with all of the programs on the list, but what I do know in teacher education is that what precludes many teacher candidates from being able to achieve the preliminary credential and go into the field are the examinations they have to pass. So I'm wondering if there's any funding here to support candidates through successful passage of the multiple exams.
That's a great question, and we've heard that piece before. Again, that's in the hands of the governor and the legislature on what they choose to fund and do those kind of things. So we, CDE and the state board, can't allocate dollars, only the legislature and governor can.
Thank you.
Yeah, and we'll make note of that comment. Linda Kaminsky.
I wanted to extend a little bit of the conversation that was happening earlier and understanding the timelines that you people are under. Two issues come to mind. One is, of course, it's an impossibly tight schedule. And also for the LEAs, it's an impossibly tight schedule, particularly in light of that long list of people and groups with whom they should consult. And it's been, at the state level, it's been very difficult to have that extensive amount of consultation, and most likely at the LEA level, it will be very challenging too, since it's summertime, they will barely be starting school, and their report is due. So I think it might be helpful to engage in some thought and some conversations of how do we do this, and how do we support LEAs to do it, how do we do it at the state level? Because it is important to have those voices be part of this process. The other thing that I wanted to talk about in general was a comment that was made about the reality that this is a draft and that we don't have all the information. One of the challenges that I see here is that in general, our draft is very well intentioned, but very general. And there are places where more specificity about how something would roll out or what we mean. I was looking at one of the letter that was receiving comments about teachers being credentialed versus assigned. And I have worked in districts where credentialed teachers in one subject were assigned to a class in another subject, which does the student no good. And so in that particular comment was saying, we need to address and clarify what needs to be happening, what should be happening then. And I think that's the correct comment. But I think there's the broader context of all throughout this. I think there are plenty of places where, as we've had questions and tried to understand, it would be helpful to try to provide some more specificity about how this would look, how districts will work. One question I have is, when we talk about monitoring right now, it sounds like all monitoring post facto, after the money is received and the programs are implemented, but not monitoring ahead of time about what the choices are about how money will be used. And so conversations around that and what our responsibility is in terms of using these funds wisely and making sure that we use these funds wisely and monitoring both before the expenditures but also after. Thank you.
Thanks, Linda, for your comments. I know that CDE and SBE staff are constantly navigating that line between what ED is actually asking for and what guidance they can provide also after the fact. Other comments on these two sections that Ellie just discussed? Mia Cooper. And then Nancy Lara, I see you next.
Good evening. And I just want to echo on all the other statements that has been made, because I do agree with all of them. But can we go back to the slide when they had the paraprofessionals on there, please? Thank you. So in here it mentioned about having full-time paraprofessionals to help. That would be to help offset the learning loss with our students. Is that correct? And then so the question is that bringing full-time paraprofessionals in, or the school district already have paraprofessionals, giving them the opportunity to move in full-time?
So
that wasn't really clear.
Really great question. So the question about paraprofessionals is an interesting one, in that it's not a requirement on the federal level, but on the state level, there was a requirement that 10% of the dollars utilized that was part of AB 86 went to the use of paraprofessionals. So 10% of their funds had to go to that. So that's where I can note that. But the specifics on how an LEA utilizes their paraprofessionals is not something that I have enough information on right now.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Mia and Ellie. Nancy Lara.
So my question goes kind of along the lines of what Mia's asking. So my whole worry with all of this money that's coming in is sustainability. So what's going to happen in a couple of years when all of this money has been spent? And we've got all these programs in place, and then we run out of money to continue with the program. So what is being done to address the sustainability of all the programs that are going to be developed and created for our students?
Thanks, Nancy. We will definitely make note of that concern. It is a huge influx of money. Anyone else on these last two sections? Okay, we're going to move on to the final section, section G, which a lot of you have previewed, monitoring and measuring progress. One section, but a lot of content here for Ellie to cover.
Well, thank you all for your patience. We have gotten to the monitoring and measuring progress. The final section of the state plan requires the state to detail how it is building capacity at the SEA and LEA levels to ensure high quality data collection and reporting. It also requires the SEA to safeguard funds for their intended purposes. This is part of an effort to promote and maintain transparency on how ESSER III funds are used. So capacity for data collection and reporting. The state will ensure its capacity and the capacity of its LEAs to collect data on reporting in the following ways. California publishes the California School Dashboard to provide information to parents, schools, and the public regarding the progress of California's districts and schools across a variety of indicators disaggregated by student group. School and LEA accountability report cards, school reopening and summer instruction status dashboard, ongoing technical assistance for LEAs to help improve the collection of process and accuracy of data, and CDE will report all available data to inform LEAs and the public on the impact of current strategies and the progress on those strategies. Monitoring and internal controls. The CDE provides both monitoring and internal controls through a variety of measures. The CDE proactively provides extensive guidance related to the coronavirus response on a number of web pages that are continuously updated as a resource for both LEAs and the public. A lot of links there, and we'll be certainly happy to share those out. So, continuation of monitoring and internal controls. CDE staff has provided trainings and have participated in many presentations and webinars to inform and guide on the use of federal relief funds. We have a federal stimulus team that provides technical assistance to LEAs through the Ed Relief Funds inbox. To ensure transparency at the state level, the CDE created a reporting portal for LEAs to report quarterly on federal stimulus fund expenditures, including ESSER and GEAR, and percentages spent on each of the allowable activities. The CDE has a team that uses internal processes to check for the accuracy and completeness of this information. The reported information will assist the CDE during monitoring reviews of the LEAs and the use of CARES, CARISA, and ARP funds. In addition, the California School Account Manual provides accounting policies and procedures and implementation guidance for LEAs. Our audit team also selects LEAs each year for a federal program monitoring, or an FPM, review using a risk-based approach. The CDE will conduct monitoring reviews of federal relief aid using CDE's monitoring tool, CMT, and staff will follow up with any findings and additional corrective action that is required from an LEA. And that concludes our overview of the monitoring section. So Heather, back to you for some discussion.
Thanks, Ellie. Strengths or gaps of this section or slides that you want us to go back to? Kimberly Kenny.
So I think it was in this section that I read that the state will provide links to the district's safe to return to school plans. And it also talked about providing links to each district's use of funds. And I guess from a monitoring standpoint, I was trying to understand, will that be the planned uses of the funds, or will there be public access to the actual uses of the funds? So I hear, doing federal program monitoring, which, it's a subset of, I think, of districts each year. And I guess maybe over the course of the life of ESSER 3, it will end up being most of the districts. But I think there's also a place for advocacy groups and parents and school boards and kind of just local people to also understand the actual expenditures. I mean, this is something, now that we have a LCAP template, I just want to say the new LCAP template, loving it. But it makes things much more easier for the public and even board members and staff in our own districts to see. And so my question really is, are we also going to be sharing the actual expenditures so that in a way there will be shared monitoring, if you will, because I know it would be hard for the state to do that for everyone.
Great question, and I'm really excited that you asked that because I actually oversee the team that does some of this work. And so one of the things that we do is we have quarterly reporting, and we're currently in a quarterly reporting portal, and every LEA that has received any of these funds has to report. They come online and they have a login, and they share with us their percentage of expenditures of dollars into each of the allowable categories. And then once we have that complete, we get that posted within about a month of getting all of those quarterly reports in, and those are posted online each time. So there's actually already up-to-date coronavirus relief funds is up, and you can see how each LEA spent their dollars. So those things are up there. They're on percentages based upon allowable use that's articulated in the federal regulations.
Thanks, Ellie and Kimberly. Others on strengths or gaps within this monitoring section? Linda Kaminsky.
Hi there. I don't know if I heard right or wrong, but did I hear that as plans are turned in, CBE will be reviewing them to look at the appropriateness of expenditure?
So I don't think I understand your question particularly, but LEAs cannot report on something that is not an allowable use. So if it's not articulated in the federal guidance of an allowable use, they can't report it. It will not go into our program. So LEAs have to report only allowable uses, and that's how their expenditure is reflected publicly.
And getting back to the question I raised earlier about supplement versus supplant, does the process of identifying if things are used for allowable purposes also include some type of analysis of if this is supplemental to other funds that the LEA is receiving?
No, the only reporting, the only oversight that we provide is that it is an allowable use based upon the federal allowable uses identified in the various acts, so the CARES Act, the CARISA Act, and the ARP Act. That's the only analysis that we can provide.
Is the federal language, is the intent that these are all supplemental funds? Is that ever expressed?
Yes, these are meant to be supplements, not supplant.
Thank you.
Thank you. I see Jesse Levin and then Nancy Lara. Jesse.
Thanks so much. So I'm going to piggyback a little bit on what Linda said. While I understand that the manner in which you're reporting these is really a compliance that these federal dollars are being used for allowable purposes, I think to fully leverage the usefulness of these data, one would want to know how these federal dollars are spent in conjunction with other funding sources like state funding sources on kind of an activity basis or a programmatic basis. And so there's sort of two parts of this. I mean, one is to leverage that, but the other is to prevent siloing of these dollars. It's my opinion that districts and schools often don't maximize their ability to consolidate federal and state dollars and to try to really leverage the usefulness of that. And instead, they're so worried about being in compliance that they forego some of the flexibility that they have to combine state and federal sources to be spent on the same types of programming. So I completely understand where you're coming from, that this is federal compliance, and Ed has told you exactly what the requirements are. But I think we might be able to go further as a state to prompt districts to be more thoughtful about how this influx of federal dollars might be used in conjunction with the state dollars that they have. Thank you.
Thanks, Jesse. We'll note that. Nancy, Laura?
So this is a lot of money, as we all know, and it makes sense that the districts, the LEAs, and the stakeholders are all held accountable, and the counties and everybody is held accountable for how the money is being spent. But in the end, it's all going to come down to the classroom teacher as to the results and what the data is going to show. So I'm wondering what the guidance is going to be, if there is going to be any guidance for the LEAs as to how these assessments are going to be given and how they're going to be monitored. As an example, I am teaching summer school right now, and the day before they asked us to give a FAST assessment. They actually asked us to give it the night before. I walked into school and I was told, you have to give this assessment. So that is kind of abrupt. So my concern is, what are we going to do so that this doesn't happen across districts and to teachers and to students?
Thanks, Nancy, for that on-the-ground perspective. Sounds like that's something that the CDE staff on the line will take note of for the potential technical assistance piece, and might not be part of the answer to ED. I don't know, Ellie, if you have any other comment on that.
The program staff is certainly listening in, and we would be happy to follow up with those kind of questions.
Great, thanks. Any other comments on this last section on monitoring? Okay, so I think Chair Melanie Green, I might be handing it back over to you.
Thank you so much, Heather. Thank you, Ellie. Thank you, everyone, for your time today sharing the plan. This is now time for our public comment. We'll open the line up for our public comment queue. Members of the public wishing to provide comment on this item may do so by calling the number on the slide. You'll be notified when it's your time to speak. We encourage you to please state your name and affiliation for the record. Please remember to turn down your speaker volume of your computers if you're following along. And speakers will be limited to 1 minute each. So we'll give a minute or two to make sure we have the line open, and folks who want to call can use the number on the screen. I know we'll probably have at least one comment from the first earlier part of our meeting today. Do we see anyone on the line?
Yes, we do have we do have 2 callers on the line for public comment.
Okay, great. You can queue them up when you're ready.
Okay. Good afternoon, caller. Please state your name and affiliation for the record to provide public comment. Your time starts now.
Hi, my name is Jenny Snyder. I'm the deputy. Hello, my name is Jenny Snyder. I'm the Deputy Superintendent for the Instructional Services Division at Sonoma County Office of Education. I'm calling on behalf of the CISC Steering Committee as part of CISESA, and we want to support and appreciate the effort that has been made to promote coherent planning for LEAs and avoid duplication in the expenditure plan by allowing LEAs to reference and describe existing plans. We would also support and encourage opportunities to highlight in the state plan the focused work to coordinate a system of support, which includes strong partnership and collaboration with county offices. I think highlighting and raising some of the examples in the state's partnership with county offices, the CDE, and other statewide entities would strengthen the plan and provide context for how we as a state are best meeting the needs of students and families. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. Next caller, please state your name and affiliation for the record to provide public comment. Your time starts now. Good afternoon, caller. Did you wish to provide public comment?
Yes.
Okay, please go ahead and state your name and affiliation. I'm sorry, please state your name and affiliation, and you may begin.
My name is Kim Wallace, and I am the Associate Director of 21 CSLA. Are you ready for my comment?
You can provide your comment.
I'm sorry, say that again?
You may begin speaking.
Oh, thank you. Hi, I'm Kim Wallace, Associate Director of the 21 CSLA Leadership Academy State Center. And on behalf of the state board and participants of 21 CSLA, we encourage CPAG to incorporate support for school and district leaders in California's ARP ESSER funding plan. During our first year of the grant, nearly 1,000 school and district leaders participated in professional learning, engaged in one-on-one coaching, and immersed themselves in communities of practice to strengthen their resolve, knowledge base, and skills to do the courageous work of leading for equity. Turning challenges into opportunities is the 21 CSLA way. When determining how to address the widespread issues facing our students, it is crucial to include professional learning for leaders. We hope that CPAG will consider the invaluable and immeasurable roles that school and district administrators play in the public education ecosystem when determining the funding distributions for the ARP ESSER funding plan. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, caller. Next
Any
caller,
other,
please state your name and affiliation for the record to provide public comment. Your time starts now.
Good afternoon. My name is Lucero Chavez on behalf of the Parent Institute for Quality Education, or PIQUE. We're a national family engagement organization based in California, and we're part of the LCFF Equity Coalition. For PIQUE, family participation is at the forefront of our mission, and we're concerned that the CDE is allowing LEAs to fulfill the meaningful consultation requirement in the development of the American Rescue Plan ESSER expenditure plans by outreach and input from stakeholders at any time during the pandemic. That should be updated, we believe. We encourage SB and CDE to model meaningful consultation with parents using a variety of communication tools available to non-native English speakers. We also encourage the use of local assessment data to identify cohorts of students that need additional resources to support instructional loss, such as students lacking digital devices, English learners, high school seniors waiting to graduate, etc. We thank you for the opportunity to comment and for your service on CPAG, and we look forward to working with you and the board to ensure equity for our native students. Thank you so much.
Caller. Next caller, please state your name and affiliation for the record to provide public comment. Your time starts now.
My name is Lexi Lopez on behalf of EdVoice. The draft state plan does not address the requirements for maximizing use of all new funds to support students affected by the pandemic. We recommend clear language specifying how federal funds will be used beyond efforts underway to address the academic impact of lost instruction time, summer learning, and enrichment and after school. EdVoice urges CPAG members to recommend language in the expenditure template that requires LEAs to set specific goals differentiated by student subgroup and integrate information on monitoring into the expenditure tables. EdVoice believes it is critical to identify every cohort of students that needs additional support to address loss of instruction time and recommends LEAs target expanded and enriched learning beyond groups minimally required by law. Lastly, we recommend the state plan indicate how the state will make the assessment information received from LEAs last spring available to stakeholders to address with the new state and federal funding and planning requirements. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. Next caller, please state your name and affiliation for the record to provide public comment. Your time starts now.
Yes, Shelley Spiegel-Coleman from Californians Together. I want to speak to pages 34 through 37, which respond to the requirements from the federal template for maximizing state-level funds to support students. This section references the academic impact of lost instructional time, evidence-based summer school learning and enrichment programs, and evidence-based comprehensive after schools. For each of these areas, the plan should include a description of the evidence-based programs and interventions, how the evidence-based intervention or program specifically addresses the disproportionate impact on student subgroups and all of the subgroups that are listed on page 10 of the state plan. The language in the current draft of the state plan is very general and only has one specific program highlighted. There is nothing about which intentional programs or interventions address which subgroups and engaging students who missed or disengaged. It would also be important to describe how these funds are being used in the three areas to supplement what will be referred to in the state budget. We urge the CPAG to have the department.
Thank you, caller. That's your time.
In the plan.
Next caller, please state your name and affiliation for the record to provide public comment. Your time starts now.
Good afternoon, Jessica Sacco on behalf of Children Now, one of the members of the LCFF Coalition, aligning my comments with those from the caller from PK as well as Californians Together. I'd like to start out by thanking the members of the CPAG who have clearly taken a great deal of time to think carefully about the public comment that was received in response to this item. I think you share in our frustration about the short timelines and the lack of time to meaningfully engage in a dialogue like the one that you had today. Just wanting to refer my comments consistent with the letter about increasing accountability for districts to communicate not only in English but languages other than English, as well as meaningfully and not rely on previously collected feedback. Also wanting to increase overall transparency and accountability for the use of these funds to ensure that our students receive the most and best supports possible with an eye towards sustainability in the long run. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. Next caller, please state your name and affiliation for the record to provide public comment. Your time starts now. Good afternoon, caller. Did you wish to provide public comment? Looks like we'll disconnect from that caller. Good afternoon, caller. Please state your name and affiliation for the record to provide public comment. Your time starts now.
Good afternoon. This is Manuel Bonrostro with Californians Together. I'm calling to, again, align our comments with the comments by the LCFF Equity Coalition in its letter. I want to focus a little bit on the SEA consultation requirements. In the federal guidelines, it says that the SEA must provide the public with opportunity to provide input in the development of the plan, and a summary of that input should be included in the SEA plan. We feel that counting the budget hearings and LCAP engagement doesn't seem appropriate, considering that neither of these venues had anything to do with, specifically with the use of ARP ESSER funds, especially when considering that the language should focus on what these funds will offer in addition to local and state funds. Public comment for CPAC and the state board also does not necessarily provide the opportunity for all of the required stakeholder groups to provide feedback in the process of development.
Time.
So we would just Thank you. So we just want to make sure that there's additional opportunity to offer feedback. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. Good afternoon, caller. Please state your name and affiliation for the record to provide public comment. Your time starts now.
Good afternoon. Martha Zaragoza Diaz, representing the California Association of Bilingual Education. There's so much to comment on regarding the state plan, and I hope you have had a chance to read the comments and recommendations forwarded to you by the LCFF Equity Coalition letter of June 22nd. CABE is one of the signers of the letter. While not federally required, but reflective of the desire of CDE and the State Board of Education to meaningfully engage parents, it is suggested and recommended that non-native English-speaking parents be provided written communication and pertinent components of the state plan, such as the guidance and resources provided to support more effective distance learning, and any webinars or tutorials provided by CDE and the state plan should be made available in languages other than English. Doing so would inform all parents, including non-English speaking parents, regarding the
time.
Thank you.
Thank you, caller. Next caller, please state your name and affiliation for the record to provide public comment. Your time starts now.
Yes, this is Nikki with Public Advocates. I want to echo the comments made by many.
Was there additional public comment that you wanted to provide? Okay, the caller has disconnected, so we will move on to the next caller. Good afternoon, caller. Please state your name and affiliation for the record to provide public comment. Your time starts now.
Good afternoon. This is Sarah Lillis on behalf of Teach Plus. First, we wanted to thank you all for a very thoughtful conversation, and for the CPAG members discussion both about the planning and the accountability, really looking for more robust measures. Our teachers, many of whom are already participating in summer instruction or extended learning to try to address and meet the needs of our students, would hope that when we have more detail, much like our colleagues from California Together mentioned, that there would be more detail, more recommendations about what evidence-based instruction looks like, whether we're talking about addressing accelerated learning. We recognize that there's a need for flexibility for local leaders, but as we are all dealing with something new, we really need more guidance and support in ensuring that there is consistency and that all students have access to the accelerated learning they need. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. At this time, that concludes all of the public comment callers that we have in the queue.
Great, thank you. Given that there's no other public comment, we're now open for additional CPAG discussion. CPAG members, remember to please raise your hand in the participant panel of Zoom if you have a question or comment, and I'll keep track of raised hands and call on folks as they come up. So if there's any additional CPAG discussion, we can move forward with that. Okay, we'll start with Jesse and then Kimberly. And I thought I saw one more hand. Let me just look. Okay, go ahead, Jesse.
Okay, just really quickly, I appreciate all of the comments from the public about looking towards an evidence base. And I think it would look good in the plan if we could give some examples of sources where evidence can be found. So I would just offer the What Works Clearinghouse, which is, federally supported, just as something they can look at. There's not a lot there. It's been offered that they test a lot of things and they don't find that anything is statistically significant. However, it's at least one source where there are a few things that have been shown, through rigorous evaluation that to be effective. But I think anything that we can provide to districts or in the plan to say, listen, we are trying to ensure that the money is spent on evidence-proven practices would be good.
Thank you, Jesse. Kimberly?
I want to add my thanks. I know that staff at the CDE, as well as staff at many of our districts, have had many more than their fair share of plans having to be written this year, templates to be created. And I hope that everyone understands that our advocacy groups and people in districts and the community, we feel that we have to keep advocating, even though we at the same time recognize, it's hard to write 5 different plans in a year and actually have robust processes for all of them. So, I want to recognize that everyone is doing the best they can. And, hopefully we will have a quiet period of time where people can actually implement instead of only writing plans.
Thank you, Kimberly. Linda?
Thank you. First of all, thank you for hosting this meeting for us to have a chance to read the plan, see what's in it already, to talk about it among ourselves, and to listen to various comments from our speakers. And Kimberly is absolutely right. School districts have been through the ringer in terms of having to put together plans. So I want to express my thanks for the work that they have done, as well as CDE, in managing all of the complexities of this whole period of the pandemic. It has been a challenge, and hopefully from this challenge we can continue to really focus on where the needs are. And I think if there's any advantage to it, just a sad way of saying this, people's lives have been upset, challenges have been exacerbated, and much more noticeable. And I hope that some of the comments about specificity earlier, the comments about monitoring and accountability, comments about really identifying which students have the greatest needs, and including those who maybe aren't in the plan right now, finding a way to do that is so important if we truly are going to move forward and create or recreate education to be more successful for the students who need it the most. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Seeing no further comments, this will conclude item 1. Thank you so much. Thank you, SBE, CDE staff. Thank you, CPAG members, for diving in. Now we'll take up agenda item 3, which is our general public comment. Public comment is invited on any matter that's not included in the printed agenda. We'll now open the phone line up for the public comment queue. Members of the public wishing to provide comment may do so by calling the number on the slide. You'll be notified when it's your time to speak. We encourage you to state your name and affiliation. And please remember to turn down the volume if you're following the live feed. So I'll give us a few seconds to see if there's anyone on the line. And a reminder that speakers will be limited to 1 minute each. Are there any general public comments?
No, we do not have any public comment callers in the queue right now.
Great. Thank you. Okay, this concludes the June 2021 meeting of the California Practitioners Advisory Group. Thank you all for a great meeting today. I adjourn today's meeting at 3:06. Have a great day.